He started with a dream that academia didn't want and a mower he could barely afford. A young man rejected by his peers, broke after a string of failures, carrying the weight of a vision no one believed in. He found himself digging through the dirt, not for glory, but for survival. At first, he wasn't trying to build an empire. He was just trying to pay off debt, one lawn at a time. But behind that mower was a mind obsessed with civilization, character, order, and what causes everything to fall apart. Over the next 3 decades, he built one of the most recognizable brands in the Southern Hemisphere. His name is on over 5,000 trailers across 50 different industries. But most people have no idea why he really did it or what he's planning next. Because for him, mowing lawns was never the mission, it was just the funding model. Today, he's pouring millions into science, epigenetics, and the rise and fall of empires, convinced that biology, not ideology, might hold the key to saving the world. This is a story of obsession, of redemption, of a man who's turned his own rock bottom into one of Australia's most iconic business success stories. And now he's risking millions of dollars to return to the work the world once told him was madness. His name is Jim Penman. And today we ask him, why do you think he could do that? Jim, thank you very much for being here.
Yeah, good to be here.
Fantastic. Now, Jim, obviously everyone knows you for the Jim's Mowing empire and what that has become, but it'd be wrong to start there. I want to go right back. Let's go back to the beginning. What kind of kid were you?
Nerdy, obsessed with dinosaurs, reading a lot.
Yeah, you moved through some pretty elite schools. You were exposed, I would say, to privilege, but also pressure. Did you feel at home in that world?
Well, I didn't know anything else, did I? Really?
Mm.
I wasn't a very social kid. I was very, very nerdy, introverted. Didn't get on with people. Couldn't even remember the name. Didn't even know the names of most of the kids in my class. Always my head in a book. Just massive reader. Ideas, history, biology, a lot of science fiction. Just total opposite to her. Not a high flyer.
Not a high flyer. I've read, and you have stated this in past interviews, that you described yourself as lazy and even arrogant. So what was going on inside the mind of Jim at that time?
I am naturally very lazy. Some people just work hard all the time, and I really admire that. A couple of my kids are just workaholics, and they just naturally do it. One of my eldest son was ducks of his school, this kind of stuff. I just never really was interested in doing something that somebody else set for me. Wasn't a brilliant student. I had my own way of thinking. My own studies. Like we did history at school. I've forgotten virtually all of it, but I was interested particularly in Greek history and Roman history. And I remember a lot of that still because it absorbed me. It fascinated me. I had these questions, what happened? Why? Just odd things as a teenager. Why did the Roman Empire collapse? But also another thing is like, why do wealthy societies, why does the birth rate go down when it seems so contrary to biology? If you give animals lots of food, populations explode. In human societies, and it's obviously in those days, the more wealth you have, birth rate goes down. That really puzzled me. It just seemed wrong. Somehow people should relate to biology. Why are we so different?
I want to get into all of your research and your methodologies and also the PhD a little bit later. But was there a moment early on that you realized that you didn't fit into the world that was put around you?
It was so obvious from the beginning. I just didn't fit. I didn't like it. I can remember I went to a dance or something like that and in school times. And I remember they'd taken from Ruth, your people should be my people and your God, my God. And I thought, these people are not my people. They're not me. I don't fit. I don't belong here. I felt very, very distant from the way people around me thought. And everybody, I used to argue with everybody too. I mean, everybody school, I got into trouble at school for being very opinionated and difficult. And so fought with my father. I remember when I was 10 years old, I was arguing we were living for a year in England. And I spent a lot of time arguing with the minister of the local church there, the rector. So I was a funny kid.
So let's talk about the academia, which you touched on just before, because this is a really fascinating part about who Jim Penman is and what a lot of people don't understand or recognize. What first up drew you to history, not as stories, but as systems?
Well, I could see, young at the age of about 14, I had this understanding of civilizations collapsing. I could see it happen so often in the past. And it seemed to me there were extreme parallels with the modern age. There was something going on. I didn't know why or what, but there was some reason why wealthy civilizations collapse. And I saw the signs. In those days, the birth rate was still quite high, but it was already dropping. This was like in the 1960s. So I looked at that and it fascinated me, absorbed me. And I thought this is the prime question of our age. What is going to happen in the future? People assume that technology is going to be going on and rising and rising and rising. But I was immersed in history and I knew it happened before. You had these wonderful people like the Greeks of the Golden Age and just collapsed into weakness and decay. And the Romans too, not that I really admire Romans, they're a bit of a brutal bunch, but you could see this great civilization just collapsing and you had this chaos arising. And I could see it happening. And I thought this is the one question that should absorb my life.
So you propose that personality really shaped the fate of empires. At the time, what did your professors say?
Well, even now, they think of things like political and economic forces and the decisions of leaders. It's quite extraordinary, actually. I mean, not just professors, everybody. Like The Economist, for example. I mean, it's a magazine I really enjoy. It's a great magazine. It's what Time magazine used to be, but even better. But they talk about policies. They have no idea of character or personalities. Why does Israel flourish? Okay, it's got certain economic advantages, and they've got these policies and that actions and these structures. No, Israel flourish because it's chock full of Jews, for heaven's sake. I mean, they're the most enterprising people in the world. No wonder the country does well. So you look at everything; it's character, character, character. We go and invade Iraq, which has a brutal dictatorship. We think, oh, we're going to impose democracy, which I thought was a stupid idea. I had at the time. I had a big argument with one of my sons about that. You don't get democracy because the people are not suited to it. Their character is wrong. Middle-aged people tend to obey strong authority. So you either get powerful, brutal leaders or you get chaos. You just can't. So this whole idea that my professors had, that people in the modern world have, they ignore character. They ignore attitudes, but attitudes, character are the key to everything.
So when you first proposed your thesis for your PhD, what was that thesis? Because it initially got rejected.
Yes. Well, it was an earlier stage of what I do now. It was not as much into biology. I didn't know as much in those days. Don't forget, I was in the history department. And history is not about wild theories of change, trying to explain. It was about becoming the greatest knowledge of evidence, chiefly in the 1940s or something like that, or the Wars of the Roses. You've got to be the world expert. That's how you become a historian. And I wasn't just interested in one bit of history. I wanted to know all of history, where it fit together. What are the commonalities? What's the same in East Asia, ancient world, pre-Columbian America? What have they got in common? What are the patterns? And not only that, but I was interested in psychology and cross-cultural anthropology and biology. So I was trying to understand the patterns of history in all these broader contexts. This was just wild stuff. One of the comments on my thesis was that, look, this was the magnum opus at the end of a distinguished career. Well, maybe we'll listen to this bloke, but who is he? Why would he say everything that we're talking about in historical reference is wrong? Absolutely wrong. Just as an example, you look at why the First World War happened, and you can see stacks of things, derived with the great power and, mistaken identities and so forth. Let me tell you why the Great War happened, the First World War happened. It's a thing called a lemming cycle. It's the same pattern exactly as causes lemmings to migrate and become bold and migrate at certain stage of the cycle. And you can actually see it in demography, because when you see demographics, you see a surge of population growth. And as it starts to fall off, you get these wars taking place. France at the beginning of the 19th century, in the Napoleonic period, and then England around the Boer War, and the Germans and the Russians, First World War, and then the Italians and particularly the Japanese. And as each country reaches this demographic peak, these wars break out. And you can see it throughout history too in various ways. So that's a wildly unorthodox idea, because you're looking at lemmings and people and saying they're the same. But the pattern is there. They really are. And we're doing tests right now, doing multi-generation studies of mice to actually demonstrate this stuff.
So just touching on that, we see the rise of empires and also the fall of empires, which I argue seem to be on a pretty regular, maybe a 400-year cycle. We've got the Romans, we've got the British Empire, Japanese. Are we starting to see the start of the demise of the US empire?
Yes, exactly. But also of Western civilization in general. I mean, look, the signs are pretty clear. When I started talking about this back in the 70s, it was I mean, it's going to be great forever. You know, we're going from stronger and stronger. We're going to be exploding into space. We're going to, but you see problems now. I mean, one of the most obvious ones is the collapsing birth rate. We even in Australia, we're like 1.6. You have to have 2.1 babies per woman to maintain population. We're about 1.6. Let me tell you, it's going to drop further. Some countries like Japan's 1.1, South Korea 0.7, about 1/3. You see this collapsing birth rate all over, and nobody knows how to stop it. They say it's all about money, so they give bonuses and stuff, and they subsidize childcare. None of it has any effect. So you can already see really, really big problems. If you can't replace yourself, what kind of future have you got?
Mm.
And the only way we can actually even maintain population is by mass immigration, which is in a lot of cases a good idea. We get a lot of well-educated Indians and Chinese, for example, but their birth rate's dropping too. So where's the future going to be if we can't even replace ourselves? What's going to happen to the world? It's not looking good.
So your views on biohistory and epigenetics has often been considered controversial, but also thought leading. Back in the late 70s, when you were doing your PhD, going through that, and since, do you feel like academia has in some ways turned its back on you?
Well, it can't turn its back on me because it's never facing me in the first place. Never. No, I was naive. I really thought that when I produced all these evidence and these statistics and stuff, people would look at it and say, wow, there's something here. But one of the things you got to bear in mind is that the way people look at the world is very heavily conditioned by their ideology, by their belief system. So, for example, okay, now you look at a case like the situation of Aboriginals. Now, as far as mainstream is concerned, particularly on the left, there's one reason: we are white people, we are racist. We are really nasty, racist animals, and we have caused people to be poor. If not for that, not for this prejudice and stupidity and racism, then they would be just as well off as anybody else, and they'd live the same lives and wouldn't have infant mortality, all the problems they face. They just wouldn't be there. Okay, that's the ideology. Now, I'm saying no. The difference is character. There is certain character, and that's not genetic. It's epigenetic, and that's to do with the way they were brought up and their parents and their grandparents and their great-grandparents. They're the remnant hunter-gatherers with a character which is very well designed for that kind of society. Doesn't work as well in ours. Now, the problem with that, if you think it's all about prejudice and history and everything, what you do is you give people more and more stuff, and you provide houses for them. You say they haven't got houses, so we'll give them a house. The trouble is it doesn't solve the problem. But if you understand the problem in its character, then you have a totally different way of looking at it, and you say, okay, let's do something different. Let's look at the way character is formed and how it can be strengthened and so forth. Then maybe you can actually have a solution. But people are so blinded by their ideology. The ideology says if you only give people enough money, they'll all become educated and healthy and all the rest of it. All these problems will go away. It's all our fault because we're racist. We don't give them enough money. So they get more and more money. But guess what? The situation's becoming worse, not better. That's because of the wrong ideology.
I want to touch on some of the research that you're being produced a little bit later and create that whole story of where everything's going, because you had a PhD in your hand and you found yourself effectively at rock bottom. You described yourself as almost destitute. What happened?
Well, I had this mowing business, gardening mowing business, all through my university career. It was a good part-time business. I actually learned my trade doing that, just going out at the weekend. I started off gardening, got a mower, learn how to do it. Towards the end of my PhD, I was sort of part-time-ish, and I made some very stupid decisions. I got a bit lazy. I passed over responsibility to somebody else I shouldn't have. They took the money off me, just left me in debt and stuff. So dumbness, laziness, whatever. So I ended up with basically nothing. I used to own a house at one stage. I got it from my lawn mowing, and I lost it. I was $30,000 in debt on. So that was my situation in December 1982. My PhD at that stage had been rejected. So I was in a pretty bad state. Funny thing is, it actually was the turning point for me too, because I got married at that stage, and we started having children soon after, even before I paid off my debts, I might say. And that gave me more sense of direction. So it started from that very low point. I just moved ahead. Once again, it shows you the character is important. Previously, when I had more money and more resources and everything else, I'd failed. Now, though my objective situation was far worse, I flourished and I moved ahead. I was just a lot more hardworking, a lot more disciplined, a lot less foolish. And it worked.
So, what did it feel like going from PhD candidate to manual labor?
Oh, I loved it. I think one of my fortunate things about my character is that I enjoy manual work. I'm actually off to later on today. I'll go off to my farm and I'll be planting fruit trees and digging potatoes. And to me, that's the greatest fun. I just love to be outside, particularly in the cold. So, and I love green stuff and I love gardening. So it was a nice job for me. No, I didn't mind that. I thought it was great. I enjoyed being a lawn mowing contractor. It's more fun than you can imagine if you like being outside. A lot of them say it too. It's very popular. You talk to them, they say it's a great lifestyle. It's how many jobs can you have where you're actually working outside, surrounded by nature, physically active, which is really good for your mood, and also is fresh air, and they're all things that are known to help your mood, and you get paid for it. How great is that? And you get paid quite well too, because actually, even a typical mowing franchisee turns over just under $3,000 a week, so it's not bad earning. They make more than the Australian average income for doing something so fun and so healthy.
That's fantastic. So, in those early days, before Jim's Mowing started, and it was just you pushing the lawnmower, it sounds like you took a lot of pride in what you were doing. Did you have pride in the work you were doing or the product that you're producing?
Yeah. I always take pride in doing something well. I've been gardening since I was 8 years old. I just want to see it looking good. I don't want to let a client down. To me, if I see one of my franchisees, I stop. Sometimes I've stopped. I see a franchisee working in the field and I'm driving past and I stop and have a look at it. And there's this edge they've done and there's a blade of grass sticking out. That is really offensive to me. Every blade of grass has got to go from the edge. Every bit of grass has got to be picked up, straight lines. You just got to do it well. It's an emotional, irrational attitude, a passion, an obsession with me. You just got to do the lawn great. And then when I do mow it, I have this obsessional attitude. How can I do it faster? How can I do it better? That's the driving force. I don't think of customer service in terms of making more money as such. I think it in terms of just doing the job better.
So, Jim, you weren't chasing an empire to start off with. You were basically just chasing a paycheck. So how did it all start to grow?
Well, when I finished my PhD, when I failed as an academic, which I think actually in retrospect was very fortunate because academia would not have suited me at all, I wanted to run a research institute, and I wanted to do it in the fields of neuroscience, basically, which is totally different from what I understood. And that's an expensive operation, and I had no training, so I needed to become quite wealthy. Now, until that time, I had never, ever, ever considered making money, business, anything, never even thought about it. I said, okay, I've got to make money. So let's work out how to do it. Now, I had a lot of different attempts to do this. I tried Amway, which is a ridiculous idea for me because I got no people skills. I was terrible at it too. I had things like a computer shop, a mower shop, tried a holiday resort, which basically sent me bust. I just did a whole lot of different things. And the mowing thing was just there, just puddling along. I never really thought it had the potential. I just didn't think that was the thing that would actually work because I couldn't understand how mowing lawns could create multi-million-dollar annual income, which is what I needed. So I just kept on doing these other things and failing. My little mowing business kept on improving, and as I did it, without any clear vision for something great, I just kept on trying to improve what I did. So you're mowing a lawn. How do you do it faster? How do you do it better? How do you do it cleaner? And then you've got to take on workers because you get too busy. And how do you find them? How do you control them? And then I figured out I could make more money building up and selling lawn mowing grounds. So I worked how to do that. How do you sell them? How do you control that? How do you relate to the person who's buying them? Again, trying to sell lawn mowing grounds was very difficult because I've got zero personal skills and I'm very socially awkward. So I had to learn the hard way how to do these things. So it was just this obsessional process of looking at what I was doing and saying, how can I do it better? But look, even when I launched the franchise 89, somebody asked me how many franchisees I might have one day. And I said, look, if it goes well, maybe 100. But you've got to put that against the background of so many other things that I've done failing so badly. So it's kind of surprising in a way that it did work so well.
So why did you go down the franchising route instead of just hiring people?
Well, mostly fear. Because what happened was I had this business that was building up and selling lawn mowing grounds. And I had about a dozen subbies doing this, and it was making me money. And I got out of the debt, and I bought myself a house. It was all right, but there's no future in this. There's no possible because I kept on selling my goodwill. I did think of franchising, but I thought, well, but okay, I can build somebody's business, which is what I was doing. But why would they keep on paying me fees? I couldn't see the point of it. I couldn't see the value. And I couldn't sell something I didn't believe in. And then VIP, company called VIP came to Melbourne, and they were from South Australia based. And they had, like, at one stage, 250 franchisees. And these guys terrified me. I thought they just crushed me like a bug. I honestly did, because they had experience, they had money, they were interstate already, they had this fancy office, they knew what they were doing, and I had no idea. So basically, I tried to join them. I offered to just build up VIP in Victoria, which they said no to. I'm not surprised in retrospect. And so I just raided their show at the expo. I went in and asked the guy at the counter, "You're interested in VIP? Tell me about it." Now, if he'd have asked me why I wanted to know, I would have told him, because I'm terrible at lying. So, but fortunately, he didn't ask me until the state manager came in and kicked me off the stand. But I looked at it and I thought, well, hang on a bit. There is some point to this. I could see a value. I could see what they're doing. So if a guy, the mowing contractor, you break your leg, you're on crutches for 6 weeks. You can't work. You've lost all your business. But a franchise system can help you with that. So I could see benefits. But I thought, hang on a bit. I reckon I could do it better. There's things that people don't like about VIP. We don't need to do that. Why do you need to make a person, for example, when you put a new franchise in an area, they would make them give up some of their regular clients. They don't like that. So why would you enforce it? That kind of thing. There was a few things I didn't like about it. So I thought, okay, I'll try to franchise in self-defense. I never thought I'd be as successful as them. I honestly didn't. I just thought I'd survive, maybe having an edge. And so I put a whole lot of time arguing with lawyers about the contract. I got a hold of their contract, didn't like it. I thought, that's terrible. I wouldn't sign that. So I got them to write me a totally new contract, and I put all these protections and clauses and automatic right of renewal, and you can't take jobs without your consent, and all kinds of stuff. You can absolute right to territory, but you work where you like, no increase in fees, no matter how successful you get, all kinds of things you put into that contract, arguing with the lawyers because they thought I was being reckless. And then we launched in June 1989, thinking, as I said, maybe 100, and it was surprising.
Very. And seems that the Jim's empire is very much built on a set of values, a set of core values. How have core values really driven the success through to today?
Well, at the basis of everything, it doesn't relate so much to a vision of empire as a personal reflection of my character and values. For example, one of the things that really upsets me more than anything is having a franchisee fail. I really hate it. It's the worst thing. I get an unexpected $1 million tax bill from the government, and one of my franchisees looks like failing. I can tell you what upsets me the most by far. I can cope with the tax bill. I cannot cope. I hate it when somebody fails. So one of the things I did from the start is I said, I'm not going to take people that I'm not confident of. Because I knew from selling lawn mowing grounds that if somebody didn't give great customer service, didn't have gratitude, they mostly didn't last very long. So I thought, okay, I'm not going to take anybody who I think might not fail. So I would actually send people out on the road with people that I trusted, my trainers, and say, tell me what you think. Are they good or not? And if they didn't get a good mark, I would not accept them. I had them marked on an A, B, C, D type of thing. And I had usually 2 people to look at them. So I was very rigorous. Now, my assumption for that was that I was knocking back so many people and my opposition was taking them, they would grow faster than me. It had to be, obviously, because, first of all, if you take a person on, they've failed, you've got all the money up front. So you've got some advantage. You've got probably fees for the short term. And maybe you're wrong, maybe they'll succeed anyway. So I thought that my system would make it harder to grow. Now, it turned out to be somewhat different to that. And what I've found is that if you're more selective, you grow faster. Now, it's not common sense, but there are reasons why. See, one of the great weapons I had was I used to keep a list of all my franchisees with their phone numbers, and I gave it to prospective franchisees. And they'd ask me, look, you're running a business in your basement, okay? You've got no money. You only just started up. Here's this highly successful crowd that's interstate. They've got this fancy office. Now, why would I buy from you? So I said, okay, there's some differences in the way we operate, and I wouldn't bag them. I'd just point them out. But I said, okay, here's a list of my franchisees. I want you to go and ask them. And then you go and ask for VIP's list and ask them too. So, which I knew they wouldn't give. And the point was my list was positive. Most people would say, this is great. This is good. You'd be mad to go anywhere else because Jim's look after you well. The contracts are very fair. He's always there to answer your queries and talk to you. And, we're doing well because I was screening people. I was taking the good ones. They were highly successful. So people would look at that, especially the smart people who do the research. They'd look at it and they'd look at both and they make a good decision because the smarter you are, the more research you'll do. It's one of the ways you select franchisees. How much research have you done? Who have you talked to? Have you seen these days the videos? So that was that. So I did it basically for ethical reasons. It turned out to be an extremely good business decision.
In everything that I've seen, Jim, you're always very protective of your franchisees, almost to the point of considering them family, I would say.
Yes.
And it appears that you value the franchisee more than the customer, but obviously then the customer benefits from, I feel, that family environment. What is it about the franchisee and the about 5,500 franchisees that you have where you consider them so family-like and you're so protective of them?
Well, they're kind of like my tribe in a way. You identify with your family, but this is my world in a way. I don't know other business people. I really hardly talk to anybody else. The people I know are in my own people. I wouldn't have talked to a typical independent business owners, once in every few months. I talk to my franchisees multiple times a day. They're always contacting me about something or ringing me or emailing me, mostly email. So they're kind of my world in a way. So I just naturally think in their terms. You have to look after customers really well. There's no question. That's one of the reasons for our success. We have a very draconian system of customer service, which incidentally, a lot of franchisees find over the top. And they often get complaints about that kind of thing. But by pushing customer service, we know that, for example, if you give great customer service as a franchisee, you're going to do better. And not only that, but if you give great customer service, other franchises will do better. Because with 50-odd divisions, people use one and they'll use others so they've got good experience. So customer service is really, really, really important. And I'm very emotionally engaged. And I personally take care of, multiple complaints every week when they're not settled otherwise. And I will sit on them until they're fixed. But the purpose for that is to make my franchisees successful. So I always put the interest of the franchisees first. So, for example, if a customer rings up and wants a job done, we have a big problem these days with unserviced leads because we've got so much work coming in. Now, I could basically try and insist on a franchisee doing the job, but I don't want to if it's not in the franchisee's interest. So I'd rather say no to the customer because in that situation, the franchisees come first.
So, like they say, all ships rise on the tide. Now, with 5,500 franchisees, and I'd suggest 10, 20,000 people employed by the Jim's network, knowing that what you have created is responsible for feeding families and supporting families, does that provide a level of anxiety, of feeling proud, gratitude? What does that feeling have, knowing that you're affecting the families and the lives of tens of thousands of people around the country?
Well, it's a great responsibility. Obviously, I feel it very heavily. Why does anybody get up in the morning? To me, living has to have a purpose. My research, my family, but also my franchisees. That's my emotional core of what drives me. Look, I do get negatives at times, and I do deal with them. It's one of the most important things. It's why I say I give my phone number, email address to 5,500 franchisees, because I want to know if you've got problems. And often I can help. Very often I can help. I can do things like, even if somebody's doing very bad, I can change divisions, or I can give them advice. I put them in touch with somebody, or I can do a whole lot of things to help them. But the fact is that most of the franchisees who approach me are actually doing very well. One of the things I do is we send out an automated letter to franchisees after the first month, and that's really useful. And I particularly ask about a thing called pay for work guarantee, where they can do jobs so they can earn a certain minimum income. That's very important to do that if you're not getting enough work. But most of them are actually doing very well. And I hear so many great stories about people who've put themselves on the map financially, that they were struggling all their lives, and now they can afford to buy a house, and people can spend time with their kids growing up, and all kind. I hear wonderful stories all the time. I get a lot of this kind of stuff. Most of the feedback I get is actually very positive, and I can see it's changing people's lives. It's immensely rewarding. It really is. Being a franchisor it's a funny job. You get people who are franchisees who are quite successful. Then they become a franchisor. They often they suffer a loss of income. Most of the top earners in gyms are not franchisors, they're franchisees. But the great thing about being a franchisor is that you become a coach and a mentor. And that's a very emotionally rewarding situation, to be able to see people who are succeeding because of something that you've done. And I take great delight in that. It's an enormous joy.
It's interesting, Jim, to hear you talking about how personally involved you are with your franchisees, but also things such as customer complaints. It sounds like you're still very much in touch with that guy who bought a lawnmower for $24.
Yeah. Well, I identify with them. I really do. I feel very much more in common with my own people who are, basically independent, small tradesmen. Well, not so small, some of them actually these days, but they're my kind of people. I actually find them I get on with them quite well. We have meetings, like I chat to people during training and so forth. I try and talk to as many people as possible when they're training, so if they have a problem, they'll come back to me. I just find them very likable people. I don't get on quite so well with a lot of other, like your professionals and so forth, and I don't identify with them. I don't understand the way they think, but I understand the way that an independent contractor like a franchisee thinks.
So, would you say then it's fair to say that you built this empire not to create great wealth, but really to return to your real calling?
Well, as I said, the emotional reason, the core reason was always the need to fund my research. But I would say my life is very purpose driven. I don't think about things in terms of what's going to make me happy. I think what means something in life to me. What can I do about it? It's like a God-given mission, and I have been given these tasks. It's like the parable of the talents, that from the Bible, and it's one of my favorite stories. And it just says basically whatever gifts you've been given, you should use them, make use of them, and that's the way I see life. Now, the odd thing about it is that if you search for happiness, and if you say what makes me feel good, and you chase all after that, in the end it makes you pretty miserable, because you become very selfish and self-absorbed. If you say happiness isn't really important, I'll do what's right and what has meaning and purpose, in the end you actually do become quite happy. And I'm an extraordinarily happy person. I am so wonderfully blessed in so many ways. Amazingly so. I've got an incredible wife, great children. I mean, and I've got a great business with a lot of people that are really, really terrific people that I get on with. It's a very great life. It's a life driven by purpose rather than by, I don't know, indulgence.
So then, Jim, what is your why?
Well, as I said, the purpose. My purpose in life is my research, my franchisees, my family. What can I do to help people? Look, it's great to be alive, but you see, you ask yourself the question: if you were offered the choice that you could continue as you are, and you'd forget about the choice, or you had an opportunity and you would know that everything you want for your family, for your people, would be achieved in an instant. But then as soon as you decide that you'd be dead, okay, would you accept that? Now, I would, because it's more important to me than my life.
So, getting onto your research, you've poured millions into epigenetics and also history. Why?
Because society is going in a really, really, really bad direction. People don't understand it yet. They're starting to see the problems with the collapsing birth rate. We're going to see more problems if the economy start to stagnate and go backward over the next decades. They just don't realize it, but I can see the signs so clearly. And everything that I care about, everything, my family, my children, my grandchildren, my franchisees, my people in my country, anybody in the world, we're going to be affected by this in a really bad way. There couldn't be any greater source of meaning than to do something about it, to see this disaster coming and to see what can be done. And the fact that virtually nobody agrees with me, I mean, some people do actually. I do have supporters. Biohistory has been taught at several universities in various ways. I do have supporters. And I think this coming book, Birth Rate Crisis, will hopefully be successful in carrying that message.
So, do you think Jim Penman can change the world?
Well, yes, absolutely I can. Because if I'm right, and I think I am, but I mean, it's up to people to decide that, the key to everything is character. And you look at any issue that's going on in the world, you're looking at collapsing birth rate, you look at poverty, for example, you can solve it. There is no inherent reason why, for example, Aboriginal Australia shouldn't be as well, as prosperous, and as healthy as anyone else. There's nothing in them genetically speaking, we're almost identical. Humans have almost no variation. Compared with chimpanzees, for example, we are extremely genetically uniform. So this whole idea of racism is just twaddle. It's character. It's based on epigenetics, can be changed. If you can go into somebody's character and you can give them a treatment that says, here's a way to be more hardworking, to be happier, to be healthier. Here it is. Take it if you want it. You don't have to. And that treatment can actually have this effect. That is a monumental thing. We see a rise. One of the things that's should be most disturbing is so-called deaths of despair. People dying from suicide, from drug overdose, from alcohol-related liver disease and so forth. That's going up. It's going up so much that it's starting to challenge our increasing lifespan. Lifespan's actually starting to drop in America, especially amongst working class males. That's a terrible problem. You just imagine. We had a young guy in our office, he was like 22 years old. He was in IT, and during one of the lockdowns, he committed suicide. That, to me, is one of the worst things that you can ever do. A death from suicide is just shocking. It's such a... You think of the misery that causes that to happen and what it does to their family. I mean, suicide is awful. It's the one thing, it's the most dangerous. We worry about their franchisees. We do all kinds of things to try and cope with this, with community and helplines and free counseling, all kinds of stuff we do because it's such a concern to us. So this misery that causes people to kill themselves, or indirectly by taking drugs, nasty drugs that destroy their lives, that is so much worth doing something about. It's a mission for the ages.
So then what does success in this space look like then?
Or developing something or encouraging others to develop something that would actually make people's lives better, and that will allow us to have a healthy society, a vibrant society, a caring society, a democratic society, which we shouldn't take for advantage, and one that can afford to look after all its inhabitants properly. And this not only just in Australia, but across the world.
Now, Jim, you've been at loggerheads with academia for decades now. If at some point in the future they said, you know what, Jim, we were wrong, you were right, would that matter to you?
Well, in a sense, it doesn't matter what they think. The point is, if we can develop a treatment that can do what we want it to, they'll have to look at it and say, well, you might be an absolute crackpot, but this is useful because our kids aren't killing themselves these days. But look, whether people accept something that's so bizarrely different from their way of thinking, I don't know. And in a sense, I don't really care. I mean, what I want is the solution. If people try and fight problems like the collapsing birth rate, if they've got the wrong ideology, the wrong belief system about it, what they do will fail. So we have to be able to work on real solutions that actually work in real life. And if we do that and the world changes for the better, I really don't care what people think about me.
So, does this research that you're doing, putting the millions into funding the science behind it, does this feel like redemption for what happened, back in the late 70s when you're a PhD student, when academia effectively rejected your thesis back then?
I don't blame them. Look, my thoughts are really wildly different. Historians spend their whole lives and their whole careers looking at things in a certain way. It's not really surprising. I mean, at the time I thought it was odd, but people are not empirically minded. I was having an argument with my research head the other day. He's a wonderful guy, terrific researcher, and great background in neuroscience. We have very fundamentally different ideas. And we're talking about the origins of war. Okay. Now, he says that the reason that the Second World War broke out was because of the effects of the Depression, because there was stress on Germans, who were therefore became much more violent and aggressive. That's his explanation, and it's the sort of thing people talk about. They're stressed, so they fight. Now, in fact, the trouble with that is, historically speaking, that's not the way it works at all. In fact, the most likely time you're going to get a war, historically speaking, I've got many examples, is when you have a very serious war, and then there's a period of peace. And then as the generation that was born at the end of the major war reached military age, then you get a second war, which is why so often in Chinese history you get these massive wars taking place about a generation after the unification. And that happened with the Qin and the Han, it happened with the Sui and the Tang, it happened with the Song dynasty, happened with the Ming, and it happened to a certain extent with the Qing. So you see this pattern again and again and again. First World War, Second World War again. Now, if you have a look at periods where there's ongoing stress, it doesn't have the same effect at all. It just doesn't. And you can show it. It doesn't affect that way in animals. It doesn't affect that way in human societies. So here's a view that says stress causes people to have wars, ongoing stress. Well, no, actually, if you look at the evidence, it's not that at all. It's something completely different. But the trouble is the idea that stress causes people, it makes common sense. It seems plausible. It seems reasonable. You're stressful, therefore you go and fight a war. But it's just empirically wrong. And that's what science is all about. You've got to work out an empirical. You get a theory that fits as much of the evidence as possible, then you test it.
So then how have your philosophies and ideologies shaped what is Jim's today?
Well, there's not a lot of correspondence between my academic career and my business career. The only thing they've got in common is that I'm wildly unorthodox in both cases. I completely break the mold. What I've done in franchising is weirdly different to anything you'll find anywhere else in the world. For example, I can tell you confidently, we're the only franchise system in the world that allows franchisees to change to a different franchisor, even different division. They can vote out their franchisor. They can veto changes to their own manual. There's a clause in the contract that says the majority share of gyms cannot be sold without the written consent of most franchisees. And with any subsequent controlling entity, franchisees get a vote, put somebody on the board. I mean, there's all kinds of weird stuff that we do that nobody else does. So very, very unorthodox. That's the only thing they've got in common. Apart from that, it's going to see. But also, if you look at it another way, character is the key in both cases. So why does a person succeed in business? Now, people might say, oh, because they're smart or because they've got good family background, they've got a lot of money behind them. Overwhelmingly, in my experience, is people succeed because they've got a great character. So you get a guy like Dan Cale, he was a high school dropout. Now, high school dropouts basically subhuman scum in the eyes of society. Hey, they can't even finish high school, much less have a degree, much less have a graduate degree. So obviously some submoronic halfwit, all right? This guy goes to work at McDonald's with good experience. Early 20s, he, with great trepidation, buys a mowing franchise. Turns out to be a very successful franchisee, employs several people, ends up turning over close to $1 million. Then he decides to become a franchisor. He's brilliant at that. He's multi-millionaire. He's in his early 30s, okay? What has Dan got? Now, he's probably got a certain amount of brains, but what he's got is character more than anything else. And I know people who are very smart, who are highly intelligent, who are completely clueless about the real world, completely ineffectual in dealing with it. I won't give examples, but I know them. I know people for sure whose IQs fit in the top 2% of the population who are completely useless in terms of anything to do with making a living or doing a decent job. It's all about character. People think intelligence matters. It does to a very limited extent. Probably accounts for about 4% of what makes a person succeed. The great majority is character.
Jim, you've clearly built something that's going to outlive you. And in fact, prior to our conversation, you told me that you'd never, ever, ever sell gyms. So what do you hope that it's going to stand for?
It's going to stand for helping people to live a better life. At least I hope it will. I'll do everything I can to rule from it on beyond the grave. Actually, if you go to jimpenman.com.au, there's a virtual gym there. You can ask questions, and he's actually pretty good. He's got more than 1 million words, and this recording will go into it too. So you can ask all sorts of questions. Most of it's pretty well. One of the aims is, at least tongue in cheek from my staff, is that in 20 years' time, when I've snuffed it, virtual Jim will be so capable he can run the whole thing himself forever.
So on that then, the world of AI, how do you see the world of AI changing the world?
It's wonderful. It's terrific in terms of efficiency. For example, in areas like legal and documents and so forth, it's great. Computer programming, it's amazing. It really helps us to be more effective and efficient. We can actually improve our services and reduce our costs. So we're right into it in a big way. The wonderful thing about it too, though, from our point of view, is that there is one kind of job that will be extraordinarily difficult to use AI for, and that's what we do. Getting someone to go out and mow somebody's lawn is a very complex matter if you think about it. You've got to arrange it with the client. You've got to communicate with them. You've got to get there. You've got to establish your equipment. You've got to take it. I mean, there's whole kinds of things. Unless you get a fully humanoid robot, it's impossible to think that AI could do it. Now, you could have automatic mowers, but you've got to set them in place. You've got to maintain them. You've got to sharpen the blades. You've got to do the edges. They can't do the gardening. So from our point of view, it's all good. So we're in a wonderful situation where we can enormously benefit from AI and really help our franchisees to make better money. At the same time, there's no threat to us, none at all. We've got a new program, actually, Jimbo, that's just been launched, and it's going to really improve efficiency. Now, by the end of the year, we're going to have a system where people can actually book appointments into the franchisee's diary. So when a client rings, instead of having to ring them back, we can actually book it in, that kind of thing. You'll also be able to sell and exchange regular clients and all kinds of things to improve customer service and reduce complaints. I mean, it's revolutionary stuff. This is all wonderful. This is all marvelous. We're going to be able to dramatically improve customer service and improve our franchisees' income with technology. But technology is our friend. It doesn't threaten us. Whereas things like computer programmers, for example, there's less and less of them these days. There's less people doing it because you don't need as many. And you look at other jobs like bookkeeping, accountancy, the
Legal,
law, all kinds of areas. They're being severely impacted. You know what? They're going to need more and more people like us to do the work around the place. And you can make a very good living. Like I said, our franchisees typically make well over the average Australian income for doing the jobs that cannot be automated. And that's not going to change. The biggest problem we've got is the demand for our services is so far beyond what we can provide. Over 200,000 unserviced leads in the last year. We just can't cope with the demand.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, Jim, look, you've raised kids, you've lost marriages, you've fired friends. What has been the cost in building all of this?
Well, I have never, ever, ever failed to spend time with my kids. That is one thing. I've never, ever believed in that. I know other success can compensate for failure in the home. Now, I'm not saying I've been the greatest father in the world, but I've always had time for my kids. In fact, the fundamental reason my second and third marriages broke down is because I was very devoted to my 5 children. And when they come, I would focus on them so intensely because I didn't see them. So I had that 24 hours. And my wives found it impossible. Even my current wife, Lee, who's a most amazingly wonderful lady, she had really big problems with that, especially early on. So I've never, ever, ever neglected my children or thought it was right to do so. I don't know what else you'd say about that. No. I don't think it's justified. I don't think the pursuit of wealth or money or success is worth neglecting your family for. And I've got 10 children, so there's a lot of work goes into that. But they're the greatest joy. They're the greatest sense of meaning to me as well.
You mentioned early on that you're wildly happy. Are you at peace now?
Well, Sam, it depends what you mean by at peace. If you say at peace means that I don't no longer feel the need to strive and to progress, no, absolutely not. I am chronically discontented. I look at my business every day and I think, how can we be so bad? Why can't we improve? Why can't we do this better? I'm never at peace. I'm never satisfied when I've got one franchisee who's unhappy. I can't be at peace with that. I can't accept it. I will not accept it. People ask me my goal. What's your major goal? You want to have 10,000 franchisees, 100,000 what? I said, no, I got one goal that matters. I want every single one of my franchisees to be happy with their situation. Now that's an impossible target. And the same thing, secondarily, I want every single client to be happy with the service they get from us. An impossible target, but I'll never stop trying. So in that sense, I'm not at peace at all, never will be. The next time I'll be at peace when I'm dead. When I'm lying there at my funeral, which is my retirement ceremony, then I'll be at peace, okay? I mean, whatever comes after that, I know when you talk about, but until then, no, never. But at peace in the sense of being very contented and very happy with my life, yes, absolutely I am.
So then what do you hope people will say about Jim Penman in, say, 100 years' time?
I don't really care. Look, if I could achieve what I want and people completely forget about me, would suit me fine. Honestly, obviously, if I'm successful, then I'm going to become a fairly big name. Now, that's an if, okay? A lot of things can go wrong. But it's not important, really, is it? Is achieving. Would you rather be, let's just have the case, would you rather be somebody who achieved everything you want in life, but nobody ever knew it was you, or somebody that was lauded as being famous and great, but achieved nothing in practice? Which would you prefer? See, to me, that's an easy. I think most of us too probably say the same thing. So no, I don't really care what my legacy is in the sense of what people think about me. I do care greatly about what I achieve. And every franchisee who goes on to live a better life, that's a success. And every father who sees his children because his job allows him the flexibility, that's a success. More than money, even by far, I would say, is family.
So then, if there's one lesson that you left behind, one line that was carved on your gravestone, what would that be?
Live a life of purpose. Find a good purpose and live a life of purpose. Mind you, having said that, Hitler lived a life of purpose, I suppose, in his own light, so that didn't work out too well. But I do think we focus too much on the immediately short-term success, achieving money. I mean, one of the greatest myths of the land is that if you have more money, you'll be more successful, you're happier. It's really a very indirect relationship, and having more stuff, having better car, bigger house, better clothes, better holidays, really hasn't got much to do with happiness. Happiness is actually, if anything, if you're going to spend money on it, the best thing to do, and this is what scientists say, not just me, the best way to spend money is to give it away to a cause that you're involved with, personally involved, like I do with my research project, or it could be your church or your local community or whatever. People who do that tend to be a lot happier than those who simply have a lot of money and use it to say, I'm better than you, I'm richer than you, and I dislike display intensely. I actually, I delight in spending as little money as possible. My shoes are actually from Kmart. They cost me $20 2 years ago. That's typical of me. The socks are from Woolworths and they're getting holes in them. So I don't care about that kind of stuff.
That's fantastic. Now, one question, Jim, that I ask everybody on the podcast, and it's obviously the premise of what the podcast is, from everything that you've ever done, your academia, your current research, and also the Jim's empire of what it is today, why do you think you could do that?
Why did I do it? Because I've got a certain kind of character. Character is destiny. Character is everything. I've got a certain attitude. I do a lot of stupid things, a lot of rash things. I make a lot of appalling mistakes, but I have this driven character that drives me to want to do better. And that comes from a lot of things deep in my past, from my adolescence and so forth. Things like the way we behave matters a difference. For example, one of the things I do is exercise regularly. I have cold showers. I fast. I do those kinds of things because I know it affects character as well, mental as well as physical health. So character is the key.
Fantastic. Now, Jim, I always love to finish the episode with the rapid fire five. It's 5 questions. They can often seem quite random at times. Basically, I'm going to fire these at you. Firstly, what's a daily habit you swear by, but most people would find odd?
Cold showers. I'll tell you what, you have a minute under the cold shower in the middle of winter, you know what you're doing.
I once converted a chest freezer into a plunge pool into an ice bath that I used to sit in for half an hour each time at 1 degree. That afterwards makes you know that you're alive.
Absolutely does. I think it has a great effect on me. A lot of studies on that too.
Now, if you weren't Jim from Jim's, what job do you reckon you'd be doing today?
I like being a teacher.
A teacher.
I think teaching is a great, and teaching primary school kids too. I know that sounds an odd choice, but when I was in my church role, I've often been a Sunday school teacher. I just love kids. That's why I had so many myself. I just love kids, and I love teaching. I love talking about things. I'm always talking about stuff with my 16-year-old son. He's a great kid. So our conversations go all over the place, but a lot of it's about history and about science. I think being a teacher is a fantastic occupation. It's actually underestimated. I think it's one of the most important jobs that anybody could possibly do with their lives.
100%, because it's the formation of early childhood all the way through to escaping out into the world.
A great teacher can change lives, change many, many lives. I had an English teacher in high school for 2 years, and his way, it still influences the way I write. And I've written several books, and I owe a great debt to him.
So, moving on to our third question in the rapid fire 5, what's a movie, book, or an idea that changed the way you think forever?
Well, the Bible is number one, really, because if you look at the way we run gyms and the kind of ideas behind the servant leadership, that's very, very strongly Christian influence. I have so many great books, though. I don't even know how to begin to talk about them. There's just wonderful books about 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So if you want to talk a book about business, that is amazing. That is I've just finished listening to that the second time through. And there's just so many books like Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond about history, and recommending my son. And I could go on a long time. I have a list on my website. There's a list of my favorite books, and there's a lot of them with the reasons why I like them. But there's so much amazing stuff around. I think one of the greatest things about the IT revolution is to be able talking books and be able to download a book from Amazon and just read it, within a minute. That is so fantastically wonderful.
Mm. What's one thing you wish more people understood about you?
I don't know what people understood about me. I don't know. I'm actually pretty ordinary. It's the funny thing about it is people actually meet me for the first time and they're kind of awed in a way. When people know me better, they're not awed at all. I'm a very ordinary guy in many ways.
It's interesting, Jim, on this podcast, why do you think you could do that? The people that I've interviewed are people who've gone out and done batshit crazy stuff, built empires or had amazing adventures, created things that have had influence and change. But at the core of them, when you talk to them, when you meet them and understand who they are, they always say, I'm just an ordinary person who said yes, who thought, I'm going to back myself and build this.
Yeah, that's good to hear that. I don't know that many people like that, but yeah, actually, I'm often astonished that I've done as well as I have. I look at my own weaknesses and failings and underlying laziness and poor people skills and rashness and all these sort of stupid things that I do. I think, how on earth can such an idiot succeed? But I think that's the lesson for anybody really, is that you don't have to be incredibly great. If people looked at me and said, this guy's so charismatic and smart and everything else that I could never do that, then I'd pretty well fail. But if they can, I want them to look at me and say, well, look, if that idiot can do these things, well, surely I can too, if I put my mind to it.
Mm. Now, the last question, the rapid fire 5, what's scarier to you? Starting something new or letting go of something old?
Well, I'm not scared about starting new things. I should be. If I was more scared about starting new things, then I might have made less rash decisions in the past. But look, I don't think I get scared of either of them particularly. What terrifies me is something happened to my wife. She's driving out late at night. I can't reach her on the phone. I have all these panicky thoughts about something that's could happen to her, or my daughter's just going to hospital for gallstones, and I worry about that, or having my kids in trouble. Those things scare me. Business doesn't scare me. Business is fun.
Business is fun. Jim, what you've shared today isn't just a business story. It's a masterclass in persistence, vision, and what happens when you refuse to stay small. From pushing a mower to pushing the boundaries of science, your journey, it's a reminder that even from the lowest point, you can build something extraordinary if you back yourself. Before we sign off, Jim, where can people follow your work, dive into your research, or connect with the Jim's World?
JimPenman.com.au is my personal website, or jims.net is the business website where all the links are there to me, or biohistory.org if you want to know a bit more about the research.
Perfect. I'll make sure that I link those in the show notes for everyone tuning in. If there's one thing to take from today, it's this. You don't need permission to build something big. You don't need a fancy title or perfect timing or anyone's approval. Sometimes all it takes is a $24 mower and a refusal to give up. If you need that reminder more often, join me every Tuesday for the Bravery Digest, and I'll be back next Thursday with another guest who will ask the question that changes everything. Why not me? Until then, I'm Sam Penny. Stay bold, stay brave, and keep chasing your own impossible.